even will faster next 10 years. I think no one can control it. Wisdom control. Then I will talk another thing, that is how China decision making, the process of China's decision making. Many people believe China, especially Western people, US, American people, believe China is a country without a democracy, is some kind of dictatorship or this kind of political system. But if such a system can play the Chinese economy so well, you cannot say this is a system that will be awesome. But actually, the decision-making process in China is very complex. It takes longer period than people imagine. Recently, just these 2 days, these 3 days, we have so-called third session of 18th Party Congress. The major document of this session will be the overall reform plan. This plan already under research or discussion about 2 years. Before 18th Congress, there were already 1 year for discussion. After 18th Congress, another 1 year. So almost 2 years. And the political bureau raised the main idea, then there should be a draft group about several dozens of people. Then those people will send different research tasks to different universities and institutions. In the third level, about 2,000 to 3,000 participants, experts participate. And put this research report together, then come out the first draft report. The first draft report should send it to all the ministers and the provincial leaders and become the second draft report. Then put into even more wider research circle, about 20,000 or 30,000 people doing more detailed research. Then put them together, became the fourth or the fifth draft report. You see, so it took about 6 steps to make a final reform planning. And recently, people have read the so-called 3A3 roadmap and timetable. This is only one of the reports to the central leaders. Maybe more than 10 of them not opened yet. So we can see this process to make a very, you see, a huge or overall decision is very difficult. And people can say, oh, only 30,000 experts comparing with 1.3 billion population. It's not democracy. You see, but these 2,000 or 30,000 experts are the top-level elites people in China. They understand what China is going, what the world is going. They put all the different situations together. If we put this plan to be discussed in billions of people, yeah, it is good, but without any final products. Maybe next 10 years we cannot reach the conclusion. So this kind of decision-making process, one, with some degree of democracy. That means not the leader itself made the decision, or the bureau, a political bureau made the decision. Actually, they absorb all the research products from all sides of the society. This is some kind of democracy to some degree. Here is more scientific. All the reports, even one sentence of the report, may be based on thousands and thousands of words. And third, more efficient. If we put into the whole country to discuss, will take, I said, more than 10 years. So it's more efficient, more scientific, and some kind of democratic. So this is the miracle, I think, miracle of the China's success. People always say, how can you overcome these difficulties? How can you move to some period greater and greater than before? And we have read many books in China and in US, in many countries, the coming collapse of China. Okay? And the coming confrontation between US and China. We can read hundreds of books like this. These books maybe can be welcomed in 1 year, no more than 1 year. Okay? All the facts will prove these books are wrong. So they don't know the real process of China decision making. Okay, I put this aside. So this is what we call a little democratic, more scientific, and more efficient decision making. And one more I should add to my discussion with you, that is how China perceives US. We have very different perceptions. Some believe US is number one, still hegemony, still leadership in the world. So China should not say anything different, say no to US. We should just follow US, that's enough. And some people believe, no, US is declining, US hegemony is over, US is going to be weakened, so we can say no. So these are two very, I think, strong arguments in China. Each one has their strong representatives, even can influence the top leader. Okay, it doesn't matter. It shows that China has more multiple perceptions. China is, you see, I cannot say China is mature, but China is growing. That means we can say something different. But you cannot judge by these different perceptions on China's strategic making or China's long-term strategic goals, termination. Because these only very small part of the scholars, experts, even military. You can find Zhang Zhaozong on CCTV, but he is not the representative of EPRA. Okay? You know Zhang Zhaozong? Yeah. CCTV. And for the CCTV, some channels, they would like to say something very exaggerated, because it will have more people to watch their programs. You see, I think recently ABC put Kill Chinese, this kind of program, not intentionally to anti-Chinese, but it will give some people, you see, more interesting on their program. You see, actually, they made a serious mistake. CCTV made the same mistake that showed outside a very wrong image of China, a very poor image of China. That is, China is going to fight against the US. China is a very aggressive power, try to replace US hegemony. So I think if the people outside of China to judge what's Chinese strategic thinking, should very carefully read the real official documents. For myself, I joined the group to draft the white paper of China's peace development. We had more than 10 original reports, put them together. Some from military, some from foreign ministry, some from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, some from Tsinghua or Seekers. But no one can say that this one report is China's strategy. Maybe 10 of them is not enough. So it shows that the final official document or final official paper is composed on many different perceptions and different interests. So China, now we have many different interests. We should believe all the interest groups have their reason to exist in China, in different economic life, social life, and political life. We cannot not wipe them out. But still, they cannot say this group is number one in China. No one can say like this. So sometime, maybe American friends will probe one group and do not like the other group. Okay? But if we don't like this group is still there. Like Communist Party leaders, if they don't like some group, but some groups still there. So finally, the decision making, the strategic making should be some compromising decision. Compromise with all the groups. So we should read those official papers carefully. All the words are compromising. This is the major feature, a major characteristic of Chinese politics. Okay. So I should stop here. I said one, the website, the other, the decision making, the third is compromising. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I think that Warren Wei, from a perspective and kind of insider, tells us something how decisions on domestic and foreign policy are made in China. I guess the point that he wants to raise is that some of the misperception about China probably resulting from the lack of understanding of the decision-making process in China. I think that's very important to note. But on the other hand, I guess the outside the world probably also can raise the issue why China couldn't make its decision-making process more transparent, so everyone understand how decision is made in China. Okay, we have heard four very thoughtful and rich presentation on the perceptions and image making between China and the United States. I guess one purpose of this panel is try to identify some of the major misperceptions, right? Misperceptions between the two countries. So I just want to use the prerogative as a chair of the panel before I open the floor to the audience and see whether all the four panelists can touch upon this subject, major misperceptions between the two countries. Then we can open the floor. Also, I would like you to react to each other after you hear the other panelists, whether you have any reactions or you want to add something. Okay, so anybody want to take advantage of
that? Well, all right, let's think here. I think on the United States side, clearly the United States is used to thinking that its own way of doing things, politically, particularly its own form of political governance, is not only God-given, but right. And this makes us very idealistic about our system. I think, fortunately, from the perspective of the Chinese, whatever you think about China's system of political governance, of late, we have fallen a bit in our ability to admire ourselves. And this has probably had a pretty good effect in terms of our ability to be a little more humble and actually maybe appreciate what other governments are capable of doing. You know, and if I turn to some of the things you said, Mr. Huang, it's interesting. I think most Americans have no they just don't have the gene that codes for understanding what you would call inter-party democracy. You know, sort of elite democracy. But in its cryptic way, it is democracy. There is a consultation process that does go on. So I think this is something that would behoove us to explain a bit. And nothing is ever quite as extreme as it seems.
Talk about the misperception. I think to the study of mutual understanding, we often consider about three questions, which are who you are, what you are doing, and what you will be, who you will be. So in the past 35 years, I think most media coverage from both sides focus on who you are to each countries. So as the development of a global communication strategy coming from China after 2008 Olympics still focus on who you are. So that's why you see more than 55 Chinese fingers, most of them you don't know, appeared in the screen of Times Square in New York City in the early months of 2010. But the media focus on what you are doing now. So this is the misperception. So sometimes you will get misinformation coming from both media coverage and the understanding from each other. So to Chinese international communication or the image building, we are just still keeping on telling the world that who we are, because we have different system, like different understanding of democracy, just like Professor She said, the inside party democracy. But the work we are still doing actually is a very important thing, because China is a country that's full of diversity, and we find more and more different interested groups coming up. It's very difficult to find some compromise that can take agreement from different levels of society. So the misperception is that the ideal situation is the media and public opinion can have the same steps to try to do the work to shape nation image on who you are, what you are doing. Then we got some questions trying to understand what you will be, because to each country they still don't know what we will be. We're just trying to do something to make ourselves to become the person or the country that we imagine to be. But public opinion is still public opinion. It is quite different with the policy making's idea. So there will be some misperception on the mutual understanding that we shape the national image.
I think there are a couple of common misperceptions, and both of them I think are, they share one characteristic, is that the powers that be in Beijing don't do a whole lot to try to help dispel them, although they're quite hurtful to the image of China. One of them, I think, is the continuity myth, this idea that, we talked about this a bit, how the first 30 and the later 30, those sort of Mao's legacy. I mean, for anyone who understands China, we understand there was a radical break with the third and final ascension of Deng Xiaoping, and a really repudiation of a lot of what came before. I think that people who, and unfortunately it's all too common, I mean, they see Mao above Tiananmen, and they see him on every denomination of currency, and they assume this to be a continuous leadership. I think that people aren't appreciative enough of the break. And again, this is kept alive, I think. It's perpetuated by Beijing. There's not enough of an effort to point out the clear discontinuities. The second is, in a very similar vein, the sort of myth of the monolith, this notion that any piece of policy that comes down from any, whether from a particular ministry or at a particular level of government, has the imprimatur of Zhongnan, that it's a monolith. And once again, the tendency of Beijing to like to present a facade of total unanimity, no fractures to be shown. This doesn't help the case of those of us who would try to dismantle that myth. So I think these are two commonplace ones that could use a little help.
Final word to deal with transparency. Yes, we haven't got enough transparency in China. And transparency always relatively, not absolutely. I cannot say White House can open everything outside. Okay? But transparency now is more and more widely spread in China. And you can say some people in the circle, some people out of the circle. But the in circle and out circle not absolutely separated. You see, many high-level officials now retired. They're in the circle or out circle. But they're still influential. But they are out of circle. See? Many scholars have different opinion. They can directly send their report to the leaders. They also can publish their report on the journal, on the paper. So this kind of transparency is, I say, relatively spreading outside. But you see, if you join the real process of decision making, you should shut your mouth. Never say anything. Otherwise, you will be out of the circle.
So are you saying that those who speak all the time and write in a newspaper, they are not influential?
Not always. You say Huang Gang wrote many things.
Yeah.
But he is joining many decision making. Huang Gang, Tsinghua University.
Huang Gang, yeah. So,
Wang Jisi joined many decision making.
But he doesn't write.
He still writes many things.
I still write.
Like Westward strategy. You see? Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you all for all the very insightful thoughts on those issues. Now we open the floor for questions. We have a microphone on both sides. Anybody wants to take the advantage of the microphone? Oh, gee. We can tell a long line. All right, let me see, where should I start? I start with a short line over there.
I'm taller than this guy, so I'll let him go first.
Good afternoon, that was fascinating. I'm Yves Tibergin, Xiao Yifu, from the director of the Institute of Asian Research at UBC in Vancouver. I came over from Canada. And I had a question. I wanted just to bring the Japan factor in here. First, because when we look at the Japan-China misperceptions now, it looks like the US and China actually understand each other very well. Much bigger gap. In fact, the media coverage in both countries is as if they were in different planets when it comes to the Senkaku Diaoyu problem. But the second is, what can we learn from this? Why is there, what has driven this very intense reaction in China? The Japanese are convinced that it was top-down, the reaction to the island dispute, whereas I often hear in China that this was driven by netizens and from the ground up, and that the leaders were constrained and were forced to take very tough responses to Japan. But what can we learn, and how, and it has a potential to affect the US-China perceptions, of course.
Okay, since we have quite a few people lined up, I want to just collect a few questions before I ask. Yeah, please identify yourself and also also make sure that you which panelists you want to address your question. Okay. Start with here. Yeah.
My name is Nathaniel Ahrens. I'm with CSIS, the American Mandarin Society. And I have a question for Zhou Qing'an. This is related to a conversation you and I had briefly before, and I hope you'll expand on it a little. And that is, what is the role of foreign affairs or foreign spokespeople, government spokespeople on both sides, and what should they be doing better, what can they do better? And what I mean by that is perhaps avoiding using terms like wolf in sheep's clothing, running dogs, some of these things that don't translate so well into other cultures. And I know you've looked into this and have some thoughts on how we could move forward, so could you comment on that?
Okay, yeah, Bob.
I just have a few things which are more like our exams where you make a little statement and say, please comment. I think in the United States there is always a latent perception of China as a place from which bad things come that are dangerous. Toys with lead paint, dog food, poisoned dog food, contaminated food products, and that the roots of that lie in a really a 19th century perception of China, going back to a very different era in American history when China was seen as kind of dark and dangerous and mysterious. I think that goes deep in the United States. At the same time, I see in China now, at least in some opinion sectors, a kind of an attempt to portray China, the United States in a similar way, as this kind of place from which these dangers spread and are in danger of infecting China. So I hope you will comment a little or think about a little this question of the sort of contagion theory of how we view each other. That's one. The other one's very quick. For Chinese leaders, well, in a situation, as Foreman Wei says, where the most important statements are those that are the final documents from official sources, we have to be a little careful. If the official sources are saying, here are 7 things that cannot be discussed, they may not be talked about, then how are we to take seriously, and as the final expressions of reality, the final statements that come forth from official sources? I'll give you a simple example. Everybody is today on the eve of the third plenum saying we must not deny history. We have to understand history. But in the very act of saying so, there are aspects of China's 20th century history which cannot be discussed. They're off the table. So I wish you could go a little further in discussing the way in which Americans looking at a country in which the most authoritative statements are coming from the holders of political power. They're not coming from the bank or the company or the labor movement or something. They're coming from those who hold political power and have significant control over the official media. How we know that that is the closest we can come to truth, rather than just the designed truth of the people who hold political power. I think these are things that are troubling for Americans, and I welcome your comments.
Okay, let me take one more, then we go back to the panelists. Yeah.
I'm William Foster from Georgia Tech, and I've been working for 10 years with Chinese scholars and people in the US who have taken Chinese social media and stripped hundreds of millions of transactions a day and coded them into agent models where we have artificial life, where we're looking for major tipping points in the society. And it's my perception that the CCP is using these models very effectively to actually control society, one. But it's very, very unclear from our research, just to use the term from Max Weber, the sociologist, the father of sociology, of a Volkgeist, a people culture, a nationalistic spirit that's emerging in social media, and a Menschgeist, which is a global human spirit. And so in my models of Chinese social media, I can't tell whether China is moving towards a tipping point of a Menschgeist, of a planetary consciousness, or of a militant national consciousness.
Okay, I guess.
I'm gonna try to take 2 at once with this. Okay. The last gentleman from Georgia Tech asked the question about Menschgeist versus Volksgeist, which I thought was very interesting. And then there was a question first about Japan and about how Japan factors into this. I think that there's a common thread here that we should think about, and it really does have to do with my urging people to really better understand Chinese history and the way that some of these ideas emerge. What we're seeing discomfort with in both of these questions is it's somehow we can't bend our minds around the idea that a Chinese person, be he a netizen, as it were, or someone else, could contain within his own worldview ideas as disparate as cosmopolitanism and liberalism on the one hand, and a kind of virulent nationalism on the other. These two things don't sit comfortably in the liberal Westerner's mind. We tend, as a liberal, whether a big L or a small L, to look down our noses at the jingoists and the flag wavers. It doesn't sit comfortably with us. Let's understand that that is not the case in China. Let's understand that Orville here just wrote a terrific book along with John Delury called Wealth and Power, China's Long March to the 21st century. That's right. That's a terrific book. I highly recommend to anyone. And I think one of the ideas that it emerges from this, if not, I mean, implicitly, if not explicitly, is that, and you know, actually explicitly, quite explicitly, that nationalism was always the end to which liberalism was occasionally put. It was a means, merely a means to achieve the end of wealth and power. When it was embraced, it was always and so when the two come into collision, which is going to win? Which is going to emerge on top? It's going to be the nationalist aims. And so, you know, if you see, as in the case of your modeling, of your AI modeling of Hooter utterances, this sort of strange schizophrenia between this sort of more cosmopolitan, liberal spirits on the one hand, and even in the same, within the same user, you'll find this, right? That's what's most odd. And then these, you know, this kind of strident nationalism. Well, gosh, that's there it is. And same with Japan. The same people who are universal values camps types, who are rightist, you know, neoliberal in other ways, can be really quite strident. And I think that our understanding of Chinese netizens, let me just to narrowly talk about them, this is sort of my area, we tend to create three archetypes. One of the sort of the people who are interested primarily in playing online role-playing games, hooking up with women, and maybe buying the occasional item on or you know, watching cute cat videos or whatever. There's the, you know, information superhighway becomes entertainment superhighway camp. Those people are over there. Over here we have the latent Democrats who are longing to breathe the free air of an unfettered internet, and their primary concern is with internet censorship, and these people are over here. And then over here we have the fire-breathing nationalists who will bite the head off of anyone who offends the apparently very delicate honor of the Chinese motherland, and, you know, attack you there. But that's not, I mean, that's not true. These three combined in one, they are three, you know, facets to a single pyramid, if you will. And if you push the wrong button, you think you're talking to the latent Democrat when suddenly you're talking to the fire-breathing dragon. It's a really simplistic notion of ours. We understand it, you know, I'm saying we Westerners, I have a slippery third person plural, I understand. We Westerners, we are happy to accord that kind of sophistication to our own psyches, but we don't do the same favor when we talk about others often.
And a little comment on Bob's history question. Chinese and Americans, we have quite different measure of history. With 5,000 year history in China, we believe 100 is still very short. Too close to our contemporary situation. For US, with 300 years history, 30 years is long enough. 30 years should be history. So 20th century, totally history. Okay, so I was a PhD of American history. So I studied American history for more than 10 years. We cannot find more than 500 years in American history, you see. So that's why the PRC history is very difficult to do real research in China. One, we have not got enough archive. Second, many people still alive. In China, if people still alive, it belongs not history. Okay. And the third, really, it will cause many trouble. So now how scholars doing this field after 1949, they just go very bit by bit, not overall history studies, just very small events, some very small figures, small areas are counted like this. Okay, not overall. So you cannot find a new history of China after 49 published already. It's not good. But in my academic, my colleagues, some are studying Cultural Revolution. They are doing very well. They are doing county by county, province by province. But they cannot publish. They should put in their own reading room. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, the